Good morning. Hey, I want to try to run a concept by you. I've been thinking a lot about, the future of XRP and I think I originally had hoped that there was, some partnerships put together with strategic companies and banks, and that even governments around the world, that XRP would be used to maybe, that some of these politicians might take advantage of this new asset class and this new asset to buy a billion and reevaluate the price and help them, pay off their debts, and these central bankers that are in debt as well. And that, boy, they just flip the switch, make an announcement, and all of a sudden, maybe that Shane Ellis theory takes off, and boom, we're going to the moon in a hurry. I'm not sure that's the case. We may not be that far along, and they may not. In fact, I'm now almost convinced that maybe the governments aren't really looking at XRP. We know Ripple talks about we're working with 50 governments, but they may be working with 50 governments just to explain, why they're not the typical cryptocurrency, just like Brad Garlinghouse took out that ad in the paper telling Congress, not to, paint everybody with a broad brush. And so they may be just working with governments to explain that they are, working with regulators. They want to work with them. What do we need to do to work with your country, and so on. And then working with the banks to sell their software, of course, and hopefully sign them up as an XRapid partner, and so on. But you may remember not too long ago Brad's interview with that Julie, I don't remember her name, but he said only, well, maybe it wasn't with her, it was with another one, but said that only 10 to 15% of the banks are even using XRapid, and now we know that RippleNet can flip a switch and they can add it any time. But the point is, they may not be that far along, and they may not. There may not be a big price reevaluation to pay off debts, and I think the central banks are definitely buying it. That's what the over-the-counter purchases would be. Which, by the way, yesterday's big drop and dump, people shouldn't worry about that. You have to remember, there are companies that have a lot more. They may have signed these NDAs. They know a lot more than we know, that actually, are buying 10 million at a time. So they're not worried about the price. They know where this thing's going. So you're fine, we're fine. In fact, I doubled my XRP yesterday. I'm more convinced than ever. But I think what I believe is really going to happen is that every country around the world is going to have their own walled garden, and they're going to have their own coin. And we've had everybody from China to Facebook to JP Morgan to Wells Fargo. Everybody say they're doing their own coin. Some stable, well, those are all basically stable coins, but they're all going to have their own walled gardens. Well, I think so is the U.S. I think the U.S. is going to have its own stable coin. Don't know how long that will take, but I think they're losing the battle on maintaining the world's reserve currency, and they know that, and they're probably negotiating to their debt around the world, in being willing to give that status up. But I think where XRP is really going to be used is exactly what they always set out to do. They were going to be a cross-border remittance settlement token, and I think that's where they're going to end up, and that's okay. We still know SWIFT moves, $5 trillion a day. That's a lot of movement. Even though you have to keep in mind, even when XRP is settled and used, it's settled in 4 seconds. So I mean, there's a lot of, it's not held very long. So, but I still think it's going to be a major asset and can be developed, but I don't know that it's necessarily. I think I now agree more with the digital nomad investor about if anybody's going to use it to reduce debt or to reevaluate the price and use it for a collateral, it's going to be the central bankers. But there's another theory. You know, if you've been online at all, you've probably seen a lot of talk about another kind of semi-pseudo conspiracy of the global currency reset and the quantum financial system and all of that, and even the executive order. I think it was 1772 or something like that. Anyway, that Trump signed. But even that talks about it. But the idea of a digital asset being tied to gold. Here's one thing that I think could plausibly happen. And I think you have to keep in mind that Trump absolutely wants to fix the problems that he has seen over, if you've seen any of his old videos for years, he's wanted to be president forever because he's a business. I'm sure he gets frustrated. Sure, he has an ego bigger than my hat. I get it. But and that's okay. Let's take advantage of that narcissistic tendency. I don't care. Take that big ego and get something done. I've been wanting a businessman in office since Ross Perot for 100 years ago. So I hope that he wants to fix the problems we have, and he knows the debt is unsustainable and that it needs to be fixed. But one of the conspiracies is that he wants to dump the Fed, just like, quite honestly, John F. Kennedy wanted to do, and he might have been killed over it. So if we have a big crash, which lots of people are talking about, if you go watch some of Glenn Beck's, I think Digital Asset Investor mentioned this morning a clip that Glenn Beck did talking about how it may not be a recession, it may be a depression. Because of what's happening, and they haven't fixed the problem since 2010, and they're doing it again. They're pumping trillions of dollars over the next 3 weeks into the market. Well, what if we had a major crash? I think then, and I hate the phrase, but there's that phrase that, a crisis is too good to go to waste, or don't let a crisis go to waste. If we had a major meltdown, I could see at that point where Trump would pull out of his back pocket with Steve Mnuchin and his son-in-law Jared and Kushner and that they launch their own digital asset, and that they tie it to gold. And the way he sells it, hey, that whole financial meltdown, that was wrong that they let that happen again, but I'm going to fix it, and we're going to take this digital asset and we're going to tie it to gold. Our politicians should have never taken us off the gold standard, and we're back. And I'm Trump, and I did that for you. And it probably would be a great thing. We probably should have never gone off the gold standard. The problem, they had to go off the gold standard because they couldn't do all their fractional spending and create the kind of debt that they've created if they stayed on the gold standard. So, but I could see where that could happen, where then, somewhere in the middle of, there's some truth in some of that conspiracy, and yet where that's a plausible scenario. If we have a global meltdown, financial meltdown that's worse than '08, which I personally got creamed in, and then we have a new digital asset that creates our walled garden here in America, and then the U.S., just like everybody else, Japan and Australia and everybody else, then the cross-border remittance is XRP, and we all have our own walled gardens and our own digital currency. And whether other countries of the world decide to tie their coin to gold or not, I don't know, but I don't see why the U.S. couldn't do it, and instill a lot of confidence to where still people around the world want to hold U.S. dollars because they're tied to gold. Okay, so there you have my morning spiel. I don't know. Nobody knows. But I do know this. Buy the coins you like and wait for this thing to mature. It's going to happen. And I believe we're going to be. And I think we all probably better brace ourselves with some reserves. Maybe pay your rent a couple months in advance. Get some food storage or extra food in the pantry and what have you, because if this thing does melt down, if you remember the '08 meltdown like I did, man, that was tough. That was tough. Anyway, you guys are awesome. If you think this will help somebody, please share it. If you want to subscribe to my little baby channel, that'd be great. Anyway, thanks a lot, guys. See you later. Bye-bye.